Something has to give in Pittsburgh as we get multiple reports revolving around the Pittsburgh Penguins, from Sidney Crosby, their captain and generational player, all the way to key veterans on this lineup, as it looks like everything is about to change for this franchise. We have so much to break down from reports revolving around Sidney Crosby and key players. We're going to break down all this and more later on this episode. Before we get into that, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, we're just about 200 away from our goal. Sorry, a full 100 away from our goal of 18,000 subscribers. So Penguins fans, Leafs fans, any fans watching this, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, it helps out a bunch. And in return, we'll give you updates from all around the league. But with that, dears, let's just hop straight into it today, where we do have multiple topics. Now, we'll get into the Sidney Crosby a tiny bit later, but starting off, we did get from Josh Yeo going in on Tristan Jarry. I'd say there's about a 75 to 80% chance he's on this team on the opening night. That's certainly willing to move him. I haven't heard any team being interested. Now, Jarry is a very interesting player. We've seen him have streaks where he looks very good. There's streaks where we've seen him not be able to save the first shot on net. Tristan Jarry and his future with the Penguins has been up in the air dating back to last season. But what is your thoughts on his name being circled around yet again?
There's a lot to break down in that tweet, in that report as well. And I think that, when you look at it, 75 to 80% chance, I think that makes sense. They brought in Shelovs, I think, to be the backup for now. And I think that ultimately Tristan Jarry will be the starting goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins to start the year. And like you said, there have been stretches where he has looked good. Mike Rupp a couple years ago, and I don't even blame him, this is not a shot at Mike Rupp, was saying that, Tristan Jarry was in the Vezina conversation to start the 2023-24 season. And, honestly, or the 2023 season, I should say, 22-23. And I don't even blame him for thinking that, because again, at stretches, he's been good. But ultimately, recently, he hasn't been good. And he's been below average, well below average in the league. And the Penguins need not that. They need the opposite of that. They need their really good goaltending and probably a good tandem. And I think Shelovs is going to be a guy who is going to fill an NHL starting role soon. But the other thing to me in that tweet, in that report, is the last line there, and that's no teams are interested. And I'm not shocked by that. I really am not shocked by that. Who would want Tristan Jarry right now at over $5 million to give you below average goaltending? Nobody across the league wants that. But I think things really, really get interesting here with the Pittsburgh Penguins midway through the season. Kyle Dubas has already laid out, and we're going to get to it later in the episode too, checkpoints throughout the season. He's going to check in with certain guys around the Olympic break, around, closer to the trade deadline, stuff like that, to see how they're feeling, if they want to be moved. And that includes Malkin, Crosby, Tristan Jarry. And, I don't even know if guys like Brian Russ are going to make it to the season. We'll see what happens with that. But there's a lot going on there. But again, Tristan Jarry, it can get interesting. I think the Penguins lineup, at least the forwards, is a little bit underrated heading into the season. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they might be a little bit better than they showed at times last season. So if they start to play somewhat well, Tristan Jarry is putting together some good games. I do wonder that at the trade deadline, a team like the Oilers, for example, who haven't done anything with their goaltending, go, okay, maybe we do take a shot on Tristan Jarry, for example, right? So I think things get really interesting there. I do ultimately think he starts the season with the Penguins, but watch out around the trade deadline, because I feel like Kyle Dubas brought in Shelovs for a reason, and he knows that he has two really good goaltenders in the AHL as well.
And I think that's a big thing. When looking at Jarry, yes, teams might need a goaltender, but with his production, I do think you need to start the season, hope he has a bounce back, and then move on from him. Because if you're looking at the current contract, there's no team in the NHL that's going to take a sub 900 goalie at this cap hit for 2 more seasons at 5.3. So what Dubas is probably looking at, and a lot of fans are probably the same, where you're looking at a goaltender where if you have a bounce back, you can accumulate more draft picks. Maybe Shelovs proves that he's ready for the starting job. We've seen how successful he was in the playoffs for the Vancouver Canucks, jumping in, going to Game 7 versus the Edmonton Oilers. Shelovs has a lot of potential. You have Bloomquist that is ready to make a jump at some point, but I think you need to give these guys a veteran to play behind just for a little bit until you move on from it. But Penguins fans, before we get into Crosby, what is your thoughts on Tristan Jarry? Listen, I know he can't save the first shot or any shots within the first 5, but there is potential that he bounces back. You accumulate more draft capital for him instead of having to move it out. What is your thoughts on that? And let's get straight into the second report, which is probably pretty scary for a lot of Penguins fans. And we see John Shannon on this SMP podcast saying, I don't ever see Sidney Crosby leaving Pittsburgh. It's not a Ray Bourque situation where he hasn't won the Stanley Cup. Now listen, Crosby, I will go out to say still the best two-way player in the National Hockey League. Yes, Connor McDavid is very good. I hate the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of people know this. But at the very moment, I would still stand on the ground that Crosby at age 40 or 38 is still one of the top players. Do you think there is a world, Darius, where we do see at some point Crosby say, hey, I would like to chase one more cup? Maybe he goes to his hometown team or just favorite team in the Montreal Canadiens. What is your overall thoughts on all of this?
We've been talking about Sidney Crosby ad nauseum through the summer on Penguins Digest and on this channel as well, because obviously there's been a lot of rumors about it. But listen, he has multiple Stanley Cups. He's won Olympic gold medals. He's won a Four Nations face-off. He's won a World Cup of Hockey. The Stanley Cups, of course, all with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He has an opportunity to do something that very few players do, and that's have a Hall of Fame career on one team. And I do agree with John Shannon that it's not a Ray Bourque situation. He's won multiple Stanley Cups with this organization. So I do think that it's more likely that a guy like Evgeni Malkin gets traded at this year's trade deadline, for example, to get some assets back in return and see if he can go off and win another Stanley Cup than it is Sidney Crosby. I think Sidney Crosby wants to stick around to continue the culture that has been built in Pittsburgh, continue that with the new head coach that's coming in, Dan Muse, as well, because obviously there was a change there. Sullivan's been there for over 10 years. Obviously, you know, there's a changing of the guard now. I think Crosby wants to stay to help continue to instill the culture, the winning culture that is there with the coaching staff, with the younger players, and leave this organization in good hands for the future. So I do believe that's what matters most to him now, because he's accomplished everything in the league. So ultimately, I do think Sidney Crosby will stay a Pittsburgh Penguin for his entire career. It's a lot of fun, and we've talked about it on the channel too. Oh, will he go to the Montreal Canadiens? Will he go to the Colorado Avalanche? Those are the only two teams I see that happening with. I don't see that happening, though. I do think that he'll ultimately stay a Pittsburgh Penguin. It's the boring answer, but I think that right now, what concerns him the most is leaving this organization in good hands into the future.
And listen, if you want to tag him and put him towards Vancouver, I'd be completely fine with that as well. But the big thing with Sidney Crosby and what Kyle Dubas is doing, yes, you have a bit of a youth movement. Yes, you can move on from Ross, Raquel. You can move on from Erik Karlsson or even Evgeni Malkin, as it seems like he will not be returning. But the big thing is, the face of the franchise, one of the best players to ever wear it, just behind Lemieux. This is a team that is built around Sidney Crosby. It has been since he came in. You have the draft capital and Crosby still under contract. So I think you continue riding the contract. You ride him into the sunset. He retires a Penguins player, because I don't think moving Crosby out for more picks makes sense. Yes, you have a lot of draft capital, but at the very moment, I think you need to kind of bite the bullet on it. Keep Sidney Crosby. See what happens next season. But Penguins fans, what is your thoughts? It's been a hectic offseason. Would you like to see Tristan Jarry go? I'm sure most people will say yes. What is your thoughts on Sidney Crosby? Do you think he stays? Do you think he goes? Let us know down in the comments. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back in another episode, so make sure to keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.